Greetings, friends, and we're going to continue our reading with the Grand Design Exposed, and this is going to be Chapter 2, Section 4, which is entitled Friendly Help. Now, I ain't going to read the previous paragraphs. I'm just going to basically go over what we read about in the previous section, which was basically the whole betrayal of the Templar Knights and the tortures and the atrocities that they went through within that betrayal. And also within that betrayal, how they actually garnered a lot of the support from Europe. Because for the most part, a lot of people found them innocent. And what happened was, even though there were plenty of them that got brutally tortured by the inquisitors and these types of things, a lot of them ended up becoming mingled in with the common people. And so here we pick up in section 4 called Friendly Help. The nations of England, Ireland, and Scotland were separated from the continent, and so it helped to breed their own independent ideas. One example, they never allowed machines of the Inquisition permanently on their soil. That doesn't mean they were not staunch Catholics, or they were much less brutal in the way those who came under the law were treated. They just had their own way of thinking about certain things, and that included Rome. This independent thought became fertile ground for friends and families in their efforts to hide, feed, and to give any needed assistance to keep the running Templars safe from being caught. They became vital contacts, providing what any fugitive is desperate for: safe lodging, food, some news, and a chance to let his panic subside. These basic provisions allowed the Templars some needed time to think clearly and rationally, to organize an underground network of contacts, and a secret system for survival. To show the determination of the English people in their resistance to Rome's decree, a royal dragnet assisted by other religious orders had turned up just 2 fugitives in England and 1 in Scotland. In addition, a number of them escaped who had been earlier imprisoned, which undoubtedly had required help from inside or outside or both. Then too, because the king was slow to act, the arrests in England had come 3 months after the arrests in France, providing good time to make preparations. Bruce, the newly elected King of Scotland during this same time period, was struggling for Scotland's independence from England, had desecrated a church by shedding blood in it, found himself also excommunicated by the Pope, and yet significantly enough, this made no impression on the Scottish clergy, giving Bruce their full support and allowing a perfect haven for the fugitive Templars. In any case, there was some kind of mutual assistance organization to the extent that it stayed alive functioning for 3 generations, 70 years. There had been a common goal, a common fear, and a common enemy to require the usefulness and need of a mutual protection society to motivate such longevity. In 1381, the quote-unquote peasant uprising gave ample proof of a secret society. So all you'd have to do is go and look that up, 1381 peasant uprising and these types of things. Gave ample proof of a secret society that was in place and working, giving both leadership and organization to the uprising as they vented their specific hatreds and grievances. As we review historic events and circumstances during these turbulent times, we see the most deplorable conditions which could only have possibly produced the groans of a population thoroughly oppressed. The rigorous suppression, the complete disregard for human life, the vicious the vicious and incredible practices of butchery that were constantly before a person's eye to keep everyone in line from generation to generation, all in the name of religion, where king and pope vied for the position as to who was the top agent of God. This was that marvelous apparatus which was loved by Rome, known as the feudal system. To get a better perspective or the pulse of the times from when the Templars were first arrested in 1307, and for 200 years after, we shall briefly, in chronological order, list just a few events that historians felt worthy to record. The history of man, and certainly the nations of medieval times, were constantly at war, causing a steady drain on manpower and finances. England and France, from 1337 to 1453, fought their historic 100 Years' War. The people were taxed, and taxed again to replenish depleted treasuries. In 1340, the plague Black Death swept through Europe and Asia, annihilating whole communities and killing nearly half of the European population. Because of the ruthless oppression of the people, priests of the lower clergy who were intimately involved with the pains and emotions of their parishioners began to petition and preach against Rome for reform. Around 1360, priests like John Ball, John Raw, and John Wycliffe, with other local priests, openly condemned the corruptions of Rome and demanded freedom for all men. Clerics, being then the only literate class, wrote and sent letters to other parish priests, intending them to be read aloud for others to hear. By 1380, John Wycliffe had translated the Bible into the English language and was sending it to other preaching priests throughout England. His followers were known as Lollards. John Wycliffe himself was spoken of as the quote-unquote morning star of the Reformation. The peasant uprising was in the year of 1381. In 1450, the printing press was invented and the John Gutenberg Bible was printed. Columbus discovered the New World in 1492. Henry VIII reigned from 1509 to 1547 and made himself head of the English Church instead of the Pope. In Germany, Martin Luther, another humble Catholic parish priest, nailed his famous 95 Theses in 1517 to the church door at Wittenberg, giving new vitality to an already growing and uncontained sentiment of the people. To go back again to the peasant uprising in 1381, there are some important factors involved that cannot be dismissed. If we're to believe it was just a spontaneous eruption, I just butchered that. Let me reread that. To go back again to the peasant uprising in 1381, there are some important factors involved that cannot be dismissed if we're to believe it was just a spontaneous eruption. It's true, conditions were at a boiling point, but there are too many evidences showing that the uprising had been well planned in advance to be a coincidence. First, there were over 100,000 rebels who took part in the rampage, coming from great distances of 50 miles or more and from every direction. But strangely enough, the movement began simultaneously, as by a predetermined given time. Also, some 1,500 were wearing a special identifiable hooded uniform, so that they could be readily recognized. Prison gates were left open, drawbridges left down. Certainly the work of inside help. Too many inconsistencies to examine them all here in this brief description. However, with all the head choppings that took place and all the destruction of property, there was marked evidence that the Knights Hospitallers and their properties, which had been given to them by the Pope, but belonging originally to the Templars, were a very special target. Considering in that day and time, when communication and transportation was by foot or horseback, and only the noble class had horses. There seems to have been some real quality time, leadership, and organization put into the planning to have successfully pulled the uprising off. That's going to conclude this section 2.4, and we will conclude this chapter of 2.5 in the next video, hopefully by tomorrow. And so basically what's going on here is this peasant uprising, which seems like it has a very, very good chance of being connected to these Templars that went underground and had their contacts and were working behind the scenes to create such an uprising. Because again, a lot of the people of Europe did show their support for the Templars. They found them innocent. Just like, for the most part, a lot of Europe didn't agree with the aspect of accusing the Templars with no evidence to prove. So, and with all these Templar knights becoming fugitives on the run, moving underground, establishing these contacts and these types of things, and then all of a sudden you have this peasant uprising, kind of makes you think that behind the scenes that the Templars had friendly help in order to have this orchestrated, and also which would also would eventually lead to the Protestant Reformation. It's amazing how God will use worldly societies, worldly groups, to plant seeds of foreshadowing of something to come in the near future. And that is evidently the Reformation. And we're coming to that time period now in this book. So, which is one of my favorite times. I love the Reformation era. So, but we got one more section to go here in chapter 2 of this book. And then we will be going into chapter 3. And chapter 3 is going to basically go into the prophetic picture of Rome and the reason for the cries of the Reformation. So until then, until section 4 or section 5, truth be told, truth be known, stay safe. God bless. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.